discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. And the show is brought to you by emailrevealer.com. You can go to emailrevealer.com and get an autographed copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. But there's all other kinds of stuff on there, too. I've been talking about it lately. I invented this way that I can monitor your email account. If you think somebody's hacking your email and they're reading your emails, I can monitor your email account and pretty much track them down and catch who's doing it. Telephone harassment investigations. If you're getting harassing or prank telephone calls and it says caller ID blocked or unknown caller, I can place a trap on your line. You can forward your calls through my trap line, and I can unblock caller ID block. But also, too, one thing I'm going to be talking about, too, in the second half of the show is runaway teen investigations. Okay, it was written about in his book. This guy stumbled on this thing. Guy wrote a book. He mentions me in the book. He quotes me in the book. It's called Finding Runaways and Missing Adults When No One Else Is Looking. And it's written by Robert L. Snow. And that's one of the things I really, I put everything else aside when I get a runaway teen investigation case come in. I have a lot of little tricks of emailing them and seeing where they are when they open up the emails and stuff like that. A lot of experience in runaway teen investigations. So contact me at emailrevealer.com. Okay, one of my favorite guests and buddies and producers and guys all around, handy guy to have around, the spot. Good old William Ramsey's been on shows several times. Written, I guess, 3 books now, and now came out with a new film. William, are you there?
I'm here. Ed, thanks for having me back on your show. I appreciate it.
Nah, sure, man. It's always great having you. You know that. We talk every day, practically. We never run out of things to talk about, though.
This is true. There's always a new subject.
Yeah. So give everybody your background and the 3 books you've written, and then we'll get into the Smiley Face Killer movie you just did.
I am a lawyer in California. I passed the bar in 1998. And I was a researcher, always kind of just reading alternate. After I was in D.C. for 3 years, from 95 to 98, I realized that the media, it was very clear to me that the media didn't cover very important subjects. So I always became an alternate kind of researcher. And eventually that led me to 9/11, kind of things that would be called conspiracy theories, but they really were just conspiratorial facts. And that led to my first book about Aleister Crowley's connection to 9/11 called Prophet of Evil, Aleister Crowley, 9/11 and the New World Order. Then I also ran into the West Memphis 3 case, which was unfortunate and regrettable because I didn't know how ferocious the supporters of the West Memphis 3 were, but that led to a book, Abomination, Devil Worship, and Deception in the West Memphis 3 murders. And then I followed up with a 3rd book, which is about Aleister Crowley's influence on the 20th century, covering people like Alfred Kinsey and Kenneth Anger and Led Zeppelin. And I tried to make a very broad, analysis of his influence on modern culture. And that is Children of the Beast. Aleister Crowley was known as the Beast. Children of the Beast, Aleister Crowley's Shadow over Humanity. I also made an online book called Aleister Crowley, A Visual Study, which is only available on Amazon. It's a digital book. And then Hollywood, that was published like 7 years ago. And Prophet of Evil, both of which were on Amazon, but are kind of in holding because the formats are so old. And then I actually finished my new documentary, Smiley Face Killers, who is abducting, torturing, and killing college-age men in the U.S. and U.K. And I just have to upload it online and then put out CDs. So that's going to be available hopefully tomorrow. So we'll see what happens.
I should have had you on tomorrow.
I was supposed to be done today, and then it was supposed to be done 2 weeks ago, and it's just been very difficult for me to upload it and actually fulfill requirements. So,
well, just like Black Friday, all the listeners, they can stay up overnight and stay up all night long and pick up the movie tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. when it goes on.
Watch it. It's 3.5 hours, so I tried to do a very detailed study. I cover over 50 cases in the U.S. and U.K. and tried to prove that many of these so-called accidental deaths are actually murders.
Okay, I got so many things I want to talk to you about. One is real quick before we get to to the smiley face. You mentioned Kenneth Anger, right? Now, do you remember I told you a while back about I had a video with Tom Petty's daughter?
Right.
Yeah. Did I ever send you that video?
I think so. I think we talked about it. She has like 3 different names online. She goes by, I can't even remember she has these trivia names, but she was boyfriend or associated with a guy by the name of Brian Butler, who is an acolyte or disciple of Kenneth Anger in LA. And he's done some of Crowley rituals publicly called the Rite of Bartzabel, which was performed by Jack Parsons. Derived by Crowley, performed by Jack Parsons, and he performed. This guy Brian Butler, who his girlfriend is Tom Petty's daughter, performed it in Venice. And some people were, James Franco was supposed to show up or attend this public. And I have a video of that. I think I have it on my YouTube channel, William Ramsey Investigates. But yeah, so I know Brian Butler's all over the place. He's been on the Lip TV and talking about his interest in the occult. There was a video of he does where there's a ritual he does, and he's standing right next to Kenneth Anger, and it's called Love in the Old Days, if you want to see it online. Love in the Old Days, and people have the animal masks, and pretty dark.
Yeah, well, yeah, in the video that I'm thinking of, the daughter is naked, they got pouring blood all over her, and I believe Anger's in the video too.
Oh, I missed that one. No, that's interesting.
Yeah, and you'd think that this would be mentioned in passing, at least, when Tom Petty died.
Yeah, you would think. I mean, I don't know how recent it is. I had somebody call, say that they were just boyfriend and girlfriend a while back, and that it was a passing relationship. But, I've yet to see. Apparently, Brian Butler was a very talented musician before he got involved with Anger.
And do you have like a central website where all your stuff we can find links to everything?
I post a lot on Facebook, so you can go to William Ramsey on Facebook, or you can go to William Ramsey Investigates if you want a signed copy of my books. I've also done a WordPress site. I've always, endeavored to really have an all-encompassing website, but I'm definitely technically unskilled, so it takes a lot of time for me to do stuff like that.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm having that issue myself. Now, and also, too, you host a radio show every week. What is it, Saturday nights, right? Saturday nights?
That's right. William Ramsey Investigates. So I do a 1-hour show every week, try to have guests that, are unique or different, talk about books. I just recently had a 3-part series by Corrine Hutzabout, who was a profiler from Belgium, talked about the Dutroux case. Pretty graphic stuff, but she has decades of experience. She's actually studied at the FBI in Quantico, with the FBI in Quantico. So she's a great resource for this type of information. And she just spoke at the Open Minds Conference in 2017 with Ole Damagard and James Corbett. So I actually asked for her permission. She let me publish that talk that she had. So that was just an example of people who come on William Ramsey Investigates.
So it's not just interviews. You also play like other people's material too with their permission.
Sometimes, okay. Yeah. So I've played. Yeah, exactly. Although I played James Corbett's. I mean, he did a fantastic analysis of David Rockefeller after he passed away, and he was irritated with me because I published that. But other than that, I get the permissions from all the other ones.
Yeah, you got a little grumpy. Yeah,
that's fair. I mean, I thought it was a fantastic piece of work, so I published it. But I should have. It was my mistake.
And also that whole David Rockefeller thing, Nelson Rockefeller.
Right.
When Nelson Rockefeller died in New York, that was so bizarre because the story was just changing every half hour. Because I lived in New York at the time. I remember watching the news and reading the papers and stuff. It was just so suspicious.
Wasn't it supposed to be he died with his mistress or whatever?
Right, the secretary and mistress.
Wasn't that the final story, supposedly?
Yeah. And they moved his body and stuff, and it was a very bizarre.
Right. I mean, those twin towers were supposedly referenced as Nelson and David after Nelson and David Rockefeller.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
That was the odes to know those two, their intense power behind the scenes. David Rockefeller was an amazing person, a very evil person, but I'm surprised he didn't get as much info on such a remarkable person on the mass media. Well, I shouldn't be surprised because they actually hide really important subjects, but David Rockefeller was really behind the CFR. So all these people who came in to run the State Department or advise the State Department were, they went through like a trainer league through David Rockefeller. So they were all put in there. So Zbigniew Brzezinski and all these other characters who were part of this ideal of the New World Order were all connected back to the largesse of David Rockefeller.
Yeah, but back in New York in the 70s and 80s, we used to talk about it with the yippies and stuff. We would talk about David Rockefeller all the time, but you don't hear it nowadays. No, they like to talk about Soros and,
right.
Like Rockefeller's doing nothing now. And Kissinger's right there and with Trump in the office.
Who had the juice to build the Trade Towers? David Rockefeller and his brother. Who had the juice? Who was behind so many of these people? Clinton and Bush family and Chase Bank. Who won out on all the banking wars that took place 2007, 2008? Chase Bank swallowed up all these other banks that didn't get government money. So he was a very powerful, very remarkable person with money that really can't be traced. Like he's in some kind of other stratosphere of wealth.
Yeah, so. and it seems like there's so much distraction and manipulation of even alternative media.
I agree.
Yeah,
well, there was a sit down with this guy, which is just remarkable. This guy who supposedly was an old Forbes writer in Japan. I can't remember his name, but he talks about the Yakuza was supposed to save the world. But he had a sit down with David Rockefeller.
Yeah,
and some people actually believe this joker. I forgot his name, but
Fulford. Benjamin Fulford.
Yeah, Benjamin Fulford, right. Yeah, who's going to come and save the world. Like, who believes that nonsense? But yeah, that's a perfect example of the infiltration of alternate media, which is still taking place to this day.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm working on something right now. I'll tell you, I might as well talk about it, but the whole Kathy O'Brien thing. Because somehow, for some reason, I was chosen to announce the death of her husband, Mark Phillips. And all these fake accounts now show up on YouTube making comments. You click. Right. Oh, he was a saint. Oh, he was the greatest man on the face of the earth. Who? How many people knew about this guy? Nobody. Also, he's got all these fans.
Oh, it's incredible. So the new PR is really just putting in these fake comments on YouTube channels. That's part of their stratagem, or part of their kind of blueprint for influencing public. And that's. I mean, you talked about on a great show last Friday was about Vegas and how many the ferocious comments and the lies and all of this kind of chaff that are on these YouTube comments. I was incredible. I published 3 videos about it. And, nobody died. Oh, you're respect the dead. How can you put this out? You thought criminal. I mean, it was incredible. And then it got pulled. I actually got a strike recently because I used the word idiot in the title of one of my videos. So,
brother, you should see some of the stuff on YouTube, man.
Oh, yeah.
I was working on this thing, man, about a year ago, where there's this stuff that goes on YouTube with these little 8-year-old girls and 9-year-old girls and stuff like that. There's no nudity or anything, but it's just so perverted, the stuff they're doing. And there's just thousands of them. And some of these have a million hits. And what do you call it? Some of them, there's an 8-year-old kid, a 10-year-old kid in the video. But you got to prove you're 18 before you can watch it. What the hell?
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. So they allow that.
Yeah. And YouTube also, too, the thing with YouTube is they recommend, once they got a profile of what you're into, they start recommending what you should be into, It's so easy to manipulate.
That's such a duplicity because they're like these so-called high moralists with this conscientious oversight of YouTube. And I think actually my videos got struck because somebody watched it and got offended and informed YouTube. And I could tell you stories about how, I'll tell you offline, but it's clear that it's totally biased. It's not objective at all. It's completely subjective. You'd be amazed. I'll tell you a story offline. It's amazing.
Well, I don't know if you're familiar with that whole thing with the Frozen videos and the Spider-Man videos. These are cartoons aimed at 4 or 5-year-olds, and it's all perverted stuff going on there as well. Bizarre phenomenon going on with that.
Well, I've heard the same thing is happening on Twitter, where they're like overseeing these accounts for insults, but it's used by pedophiles flat out. That there's these pedophile accounts, that they don't bar, they don't ban.
Well, the show I was supposed to do today was about an open secret, and a big part of that is this group, this Digital Entertainment Network that was run by Brian Singer, and this was back in I guess the early 90s, and obviously run by pedophiles. There's no doubt about that. But hundreds and thousands hundreds of millions of dollars were pumped into this company by people like David Geffen and all characters like that. And it's in the movie. So,
wow, that's incredible. I've heard rumors about Geffen, and I've actually seen the pictures of Brian Singer with like 12-year-old boys, tons of them. Who's that? Another 12-year-old boy. Another 12-year-old boy. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, check out An Open Secret. Check it out. It's on Vimeo.
Okay.
Well, back to the smiley face killers. I got this email a while back, and I think he mentions you. I think he mentions you in this thing too. In one of the emails, anyway. Let me just read this to you. He says, "My name is Joe. I live in Australia. I fit the general profile for smiley face victims. Before recently, I'd never heard of the phenomenon. However, about 18 months ago, I was in Sydney, Australia, and had a couple of drinks. I don't usually drink. I found myself, for whatever reason, I have my own theory, falling further into a state of mind that was leaving me almost zombie-like and very persuadable. For I went from being lucid one day to missing a full month of my life, just drifting without a thought of going home." By the way, this guy has no commas, no periods, no nothing. I'm doing the best I can. "I felt possessed. After about a month of very odd behavior, I was convinced that I was being controlled by another entity. Things culminated in me following, in a zombie-like manner, two lights in the sky that led me directly to the closest body of water, the Sydney Harbor, and was headed toward certain drowning, as my only thoughts were an uncontrollable urge to follow the lights and step into the harbor, when suddenly, somehow, it took all my mental strength to deny the urge. I found myself staring at the body of water that would have consumed me, and at that point seemed to snap out of it. And I think for myself again, I was horrified, as I had clear memory of the last month's weird behavior, to say the least. To cut to the chase, within a couple of days, a man's body was found in the exact location of the harbor I was so eagerly going to throw myself into. You could Google this event, man found floating in Sydney Harbor. It really tells them what to Google. You can Google this event, man found in Sydney Harbor in 2016. It was a mystery as to how and why he ended up there, but he also fit the profile. I'm not one to make outrageous claims. I'm just trying to explain a very strange event that nearly ended my life. I believe a smiley face was found hidden nearby on a wooden post at the harbor. I believe these people are under some type of mind control experience, and I believe the only thing that saved me is perhaps a disorder I have that may have prevented the control I was under momentarily at that vital moment. I don't believe I was singled out. I believe a net may have been cast, and those vulnerable were subject to the suggestive state. So in short, I think mind control was used to first make me disconnect from the society, as in the period I found myself throwing my laptop, phone, and headphones in the rubbish. So he threw away his laptop and his headphones. And early, my family had not heard from me, and then eventually it culminated in me nearly plunging to my death, only to find out someone else met that same fate. Then he says in all caps, "This absolutely happened to me, and it's hard to describe. I could go into more detail of strange behavior, but also events and people, entities surrounding me throughout this time." And then he says, "What do you believe?" Now, I tried to contact this guy several times. I'm going to try and go back and find this guy. Maybe you should try and find him too.
Okay.
And finally, we kept missing the appointment. He missed it, over and over. We had an appointment scheduled. Sometimes he doesn't get back to me. And the one time I got him on the phone, like I said, it was late in the night for him over there. And he sounded out of it. So I just kind of blew it off. He sounded almost like someone with a handicap or a speech impediment or something. So I just kind of blew it off. But maybe I should give it another try, reading this again. I don't think I've ever read the whole thing carefully, to tell you the truth. But what do you make of this?
Well, it fits all the elements of these types of killings. So I've read hundreds of cases now that fit this type of MO. And it fits the same type of thing, that somebody's been drugged and they kind of space out and either get suggested or something happens, out-of-body experience, and they end up in water. So I don't know the total. It's a bit of a stretch for me that he's following two lights in the sky. Mm-hmm. Typically there's other human involvement in these types of cases. But, I just sent you a link right now that you can read on the New York Times. When gangs killed gay men for sport, Australia reviews 88 deaths. These are all deaths in the Sydney Harbor. And so there's a pattern there, too, that fits these type of things. And there's definitely a homosexual component to what's known as the smiley face killings. And that there's a smiley face there. I don't know if that's the case in Sydney. It'd be fascinating to see it there. But that symbol definitely has an occult occult provenance, no question.
Well, what's the history of the occult connection to the smiley face?
Well, it goes back even before Moore. Like Alan Moore, who says he's a magician. He used that in The Watchmen, this novel, The Watchmen. But it precedes that. It actually goes way back into the underground industrial house music. They use that symbol. And that's really the true provenance and the usage of it. And I talk about it. I had a video all about the smiley face killers and its use in modern TV and film on my web channel, William Ramsey Investigates. I talk about it, but really what it means, it's kind of like the world is a big joke. And it's kind of a concept that's within the occult. Crowley wrote about it, where the universe is just a big joke. And you don't have that much meaning. And this guy, the comedian who is in this movie, The Watchmen, he basically has the smiley face on his gun, which he uses to kill people. He has it on his lapel. And when he dies, his own blood ends up on the outside of that smiley face killing. And the reason why I'm interested in the smiley face killings and the smiley face symbol as a meaning was not Alan Moore. It was actually David Bowie's last kind of opus that he wrote, which is Black Star. In that video, this kind of representation of Major Tom, who is probably either Bowie or Satan, is wearing a smiley face on his lapel in the same spot that the comedian wears on his lapel in The Watchmen. So that's really what is the meaning of this? And it goes way back. And I have things in my documentary that'll terrify you, the connections and who is using the smiley face, people that you may know or not know, and who have it on their body. And actually the smiley face popped up in friends of people who are in Comet Ping Pong. One of the things that people got set off about Comet Ping Pong was all of the Instagram posts and the connections between the people who were associated with Jellython. I mean, those people was very, they used the smiley face commonly, so it's pretty remarkable.
That's interesting. And it was something about Mr. Potato Head, too, a connection to the whole Alphonsus thing.
Well, there were symbols that they were using. Some were obvious and some were unknown. And I bet people have crossed right over, some of the meanings. But they were using all kinds of subtle, allegories or symbols of other meanings. Like one was the panda with its like eyes,
right.
Had a blue. That's actually an S&M term, So they were using very things that are associated with fetish / S&M stuff that, you kind of got to key into.
It's fascinating. So many people will say, "Well, I don't believe Pizzagate. I don't see." Just what is on the very surface there on his Instagram account. That alone, if you were undergoing a custody evaluation between you and your wife about who's going to get custody of the kids, that alone would possibly get you supervised custody, a visitation of your own kid.
Right. Yeah. Just hanging out with kids and taping them to tables.
Yeah.
And joking around and all these inside jokes. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Chicken lover, kill room, all that, Yeah. Then when you start getting into the death threats and the stuff that's gone on around the case, there's just no way. Anyway, and people still want to.
It merited a much deeper investigation by governmental authorities, not just online investigators, and that never happened. That's a shame, because I think that there was enough there to merit, a child abuse inquiry, something like that. What are these kids doing with these adults? What's going on at this weird pizza place? Yeah,
they had an after-school program there too. Now,
it's crazy. I mean, there were supposedly reports of people sitting inside Comet Ping Pong, watching little kids like go into the back room and pop back out, where there was a whole nother room of people just hanging out. I mean, super sketchy behavior, and that doesn't even talk about the people who were, in downstairs and the musicians and stuff like that talking about little kids. I mean,
yeah.
Super creepy.
Yeah, when you go back and revisit all that stuff, there was just so much to it. But don't you think, too, that, again, because we know for a fact Alphonsus was watching every single word ever written about him. Right. He was reading everything. We know that for a fact. Right. But there seems to be also, too, that the hysteria behind it. You think that was organic, or you think some of that was some of it had to be
Well, I think that the timing was interesting right before the election, and I definitely believe there were people on the alt-right who bullhorned the whole story about Comet Ping Pong because it was worthwhile, and it came, I think, they came to Comet Ping Pong after the Podesta emails. That's what led people to Comet Ping Pong and Instagram, so that trail leads back to those emails, which, were incredible. The whole story about, blood sacrifice or whatever. What was the story? What was that lady?
Spirit cooking.
Spirit cooking. That's right. So that's really what led people to Comet Ping Pong. So I do think that those elements probably, swung the election against Hillary Clinton 2 or 3 points. That's enough. That was enough to do it. Like, you can't put this person in who's hanging around with a bunch of pedophiles and creepy people and spirit cooker. So I think that it was definitely bullhorn, because I was following people who were telling that story, and they all lead back to the Trump campaign.
Yeah, fascinating, man.
And remain on the Trump campaign for that. There are people who still pop around. Cernovich, Posobiec, these guys all have press passes that let them into the White House, and they were all talking about Comet Ping Pong prior to the election.
Yeah, just the most bizarre situation we've ever been in. I think in the recent history of this country, this bizarre presidency, just one chaotic day after another.
Yeah, it's bizarre. It's very strange.
You got Kissinger sitting there.
Oh, it's just so bizarre. I mean, it's like the chaos magician presidency. Firing people, talking to people, twittering all the time. It's amazing. I've never, it's very unique.
Fighting with the parents of killed soldiers. Soldiers just died.
Everything is conflict, and
it just fights with the parents. Oh my God! Now,
it's amazing.
What about the first time? I guess I saw that. Who's that guy? Grogan. Grogan, right?
Joe Rogan?
No, the cop. And I'm talking about Smiley Face now. The cop from New York.
Okay. Right. It's Gannon and Duarte were the two cops from L.A. They were both detectives, and then Gilbertson was a guy from Wisconsin, a professor. And they Gannon and Gilbertson wrote the book Case Studies in Drowning Forensics. That's really the first book. It's a very academic study of these types of cases.
Now, what about, did you get a chance to talk to Gannon?
I definitely was put in touch, and I just didn't. I felt like I wanted to talk to him after I did the documentary to maintain objectivity. Okay. So I do have the opportunity. I mean, I know people who talk to Gilbertson and Gannon often, the death that took place in Pittsburgh, the guy by the name of Dakota James, that happened earlier this year, that family was in touch with Gannon and me, asking me questions, or the people outside of the core of that family, trying to figure out what was going on. After he disappeared, and then after he was found dead 40 days after he disappeared.
Because I guess that's when the first time I came across Smiley Face's Gannon's work, and I tried to book him a couple of times, and I think even you tried to help book him. And he's friends with Carl Denaro, who was on the show, who was shot by Son of Sam.
Right, interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, they're buddies. Yeah, strange bedfellows, right?
It's interesting, because Denaro and I, we exchange information all the time.
Okay,
on
cool.
Facebook, yes.
Oh, and he hasn't mentioned that to you. Okay, because I begged him to get him on.
No,
now
I didn't know him.
Then when I had Jim Rothstein on the show, he was convinced that it's Process Church, that he followed the Process Church across the country when they were traveling down from east to west and stopping in different cities and states. And he's convinced that the Process Church has a smiley face behind Smiley Face. Well, what do you make of that?
I will neither confirm nor deny, but I will say that there's definitely an underground aspect to these disappearances, and I explain everything. I think that you'll be... The documentary explains all. It goes in very, very deep detail, but there's a lot of speculation going on about people who are traveling or moving frequently involved in these cases. That there's these huge events, whether it's a St. Patrick's Day event, whether it's a New Year's event, whether there's a huge convention in town, like Joey LaBute in Columbus. There was an Arnold Schwarzenegger bodylifting event when he disappeared. He was actually across the street. He was a gay young man, and he was across the street from a gay bar that was actually owned by the same bar he was in. And he disappeared and ended up in water. And so there's definitely this, I believe, and I think that there's the perpetrators of these crimes are mobile. They're moving to and fro. I do believe these crimes are associated with, a lot of movement, people who are moving and leaving and doing crimes and leaving. And digital communications. I believe that these are associated with people who are on Grindr or all these gay apps, in part, not all of them.
Oh, really? So there's a connection to these people being on these gay dating websites.
Absolutely. Joey LaBute, Dakota James. It's known that Joey LaBute was on Grindr, and Dakota James is actually filmed walking through a park. I think it was Katz Park in downtown Pittsburgh on the phone. And that whole notion of him walking around on the phone, actually, there are some people who have analyzed these cases and believe that these are drownings. These are all accidental drownings. And I think that that's the myth that's grown up around these cases. And the actual evidence shows that these guys are actually, they might have been drinking, but they are competent to walk, whether it's Dakota James, who's clearly walking and typing on his phone at the same time, so he's not over inebriated, and if he fell in water, he'd be able to get out. That's a perfect example. There was another guy who came out of, well, there's two guys actually, out of Boston who CCTV saw them walking around, so they're competent enough to be filmed walking around upright, and then supposedly they fall in water and drowned. So that whole conclusion about these cases, I think I will prove to be 100% false, that these are accidental drownings.
Well, and if you go back and consider this email I got from this guy in Australia, Joe, he talks about, okay, he drank the stuff, and then he walked around like a zombie for a month, because I know a lot of these cases, that's part of it. They don't drown right away. They drown like a week later, but no one's seen them in all that time.
Well, that's an interesting point. I'm glad you made that point, because nobody's seen, almost all these cases, nobody's seen them drowned. There's no evidence, and a lot of these places where they disappear are in public environments. Well, for example, downtown Boston, where there's been a lot of these cases, why hasn't anybody seen these guys splash in the water? There's no evidence. And then I think that's a good example. And why are they found later? A lot of the, you can get into the forensic details of drowning when bodies hit the bottom of the whatever body of water, when they surface, and the bodies are found way outside the timeline of standard discovery of drowning victims in places that have already been pre-searched. Perfect example, there was a death within the last month in Manchester, where there's definitely like a very hot zone in Manchester area in northern UK. This kid, Casper Blackburn, left the bar, disappeared. And there's all these canals. Manchester was like a canal town, and there's all these canals in Manchester. All these canals are checked, and then his body pops up 9 days later. So why is that? Why was he not found in the water on a walk through in water? And I think if you see my documentary, I show this in many cases. That's the same place, and bodies show up in places that have already been checked.
But what about, like, also too, any signs that they've been eating,
Well, that's a great question too, because a lot of these cases, because it's the coroner just determines it's an accidental drownings, they're not studied as murders,
right?
And so some of the autopsies aren't obtained. One of the more stunning cases was the McNeil case. This is out in New York, a kid who disappeared and was found in a water treatment plant south of downtown Manhattan, and he was found, and they just turned it an accidental drowning. His family got the autopsy. They found out this guy had like burns on his body, like somebody took a blowtorch to his face, the upper part of his body, and I think he had cracked teeth, like somebody tortured him. And the family didn't know, because the police and the forensic pathologist said that he died from an accidental drowning. Well, how do you accidentally drown and then blowtorch yourself? And then it was one guy, what's the guy's name who lives in Pittsburgh? There's a famous forensic. What's the guy who did the John Bonet case? His name, forensic.
Cyril Wecht.
Cyril Wecht.
Okay.
Cyril Wecht looked at. Thank you. Cyril Wecht looked at the McNeil case and said this guy was tortured prior to death. So, the families don't know the totality of what's going on. Cyril Wecht lives in Pittsburgh, by the way. So in the Dakota James case, the family called him, and there's going to be a second autopsy. I don't know what the results of the second autopsy are, but he's still involved in these cases. Cyril Wecht has looked at the McNeil case, and there was another case in Michigan he looked at as well, and said these guys were killed, prior to being found in water.
You mentioned how they're like traveling back and forth to these conventions and stuff and concerts, I guess. What about that girl who was abducted or went missing from the Metallica concert? Remember you booked the mother on the show for me?
Yeah, that's right. That was the guy who was the perpetrator was an African American, right? And he had murdered other people. He had been plying his murder spree at groups like that, right? Didn't he kill somebody else who was at another college or something? Another girl?
I know he left her clothing. He left her T-shirt on a post near a college in order to draw attention to himself. I remember that.
Interesting. I think that guy had done he was a serial killer, that black guy. And she was at a Metallica concert. And there was another victim. I think he got out of Virginia as well, if I remember correctly. But I do think that that's like my whole point, is that people are moving to these zones where they're finding their victims, and then moving away. And I talk about, certain cases, certain individuals that fit the profile who've already been caught, using Grindr or traveling to places where there are young men in bars. I mean, there's incredible cases, and you'll see it in the documentary.
But it's always young men. It's not young women too?
Well, I think that the definition, if you want to apply the definition to the smiley face killers and what it's always been determined as, is it's young men. From the very get-go, from the very beginning, the first cases, whether it's McNeil or all these other cases that went down New York, La Crosse, Wisconsin, it was always the smiley face killer. So that was always how this case was associated. Whether these people are going after victims that are women as well, there's just not a rash of women falling and being found in water like men are. It's just not happening. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that are very valid. Women are much more protective of themselves at night than men. So they will never, generally never leave a bar with a girl by themselves, whereas a man will just walk home by himself. And this is a very common place where, some men disappear, is walking home by themselves. So there just isn't that rash. I haven't come across that rash of women being found in water like the cases that are associated with smiley face killers.
Well, what about the woman who wound up in that water tank on Bowery and Skid Row?
Lisa Lamb, Lamb in downtown LA.
Yeah, look into that.
That's a weird case.
That's a weird case.
Yeah, it's a very strange case. She, they have video of her looking out of her elevator, but I surmise that she was somehow abducted, and that was the place where they dumped the body, was in that water tank on top of the thing. So it was either somebody who was living at that Cecil Hotel, which is used to be sketchy. It's not really sketchy anymore, but either that or somebody who worked there. That's my analysis. Somebody who was comfortable with being on the property.
Yeah, but did you ever see the route that they would have to take to pull her body up that ladder and stuff to get the body in that tank? It's pretty darn.
Yeah, I think it like a ladder. You had to go up a metal ladder to the roof. I have to go back and look at that again. Yeah, it would have been, but I don't know. I think that she was probably abducted and something happened to her. That's my guess. I don't have that. People have talked to me about smiley face killers, and there's some new supernatural involvement. I've never adhered to that in most cases, so Do
you know that in that Skid Row hotel too, that registered to one of the rooms, there's a defense contractor that's registered. Yeah, that's what this company's based.
Wasn't there like the pedophile or another killer was there too? With his son or something like that.
Right, yeah, I forgot about that.
So there were sketchy people living there, and there were two serial killers, right? It was Rodriguez, right? Or what was his name? The Night Stalker lived there.
Richard Ramirez, really? I didn't know
Richard Ramirez, yeah. Oh. Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, lived there, and an Austrian serial killer who killed women stayed there. And his name was... I actually wrote about him as a kind of cause celebre killer and likened him to Damien Eccles in a video. I can't remember his name right now. But yeah, he actually stayed there and killed somebody in Los Angeles, and then went back to Austria. His name was Jack Unterweger.
Okay, that sounds familiar too. Yeah.
So Richard Ramirez and Jack Unterweger both stayed at the Cecil Hotel.
Well, speak of the devil, tomorrow I'm interviewing this gentleman, Patrick, who was behind the video series Program to Kill, a Satanic Cover-Up. Mm-hmm. And just as we were talking about this, his name popped up on Skype. Okay, just as we started talking about this. It's an 80-part series, really good work. And he's convinced, this guy's convinced, he kind of convinced me too, that Richard Ramirez did not act alone. And that Richard Ramirez didn't do all of those murders. Some of them, yeah.
That's amazing. That's the first time I've heard of that.
Well, there's no doubt Ramirez did it for Satanism, because I interviewed this other woman, Kathy, I think it was Belinsky, That was the first interview she ever did in her whole life when she first became a true crime writer. And she used to talk to Ramirez all the time on the phone. He would call her from prison. And she said he would ask me, like, okay, what do you see on your refrigerator? What do you see? What are you looking on? What are you watching on TV? Look out your window. What do you see? Things like that. And she would ask him, well, why'd you do this? Was it? And he goes, oh, yeah, it was all for Satan. It was all for Satan. But then he would just move on to the next topic. Like, yeah, that was all Satanism. So just.
Well, I think he was a member of the Church of Satan under LaVey. They just kept it quiet, right? Didn't he attend meetings? Wasn't there evidence that he was at least at the meeting?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he had the pentagram in his hand and stuff like that, too.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, what about, you mentioned, too, that, again, they're going to concerts, they're going to big events, they're traveling. What about, like, these traveling events that I'm very suspicious of, like the Ren Fair, the Renaissance Fair, and these carnivals, man? It's not as big.
It could be something to do with that. I mean, it could be some kind of traveling carnival people. I mean, I know that the guy who was Crowley's heir, well, one of Crowley's heirs, his name was McMurtry. He used to go to Renaissance fairs and, throw tarot cards, but I don't know. There's just clearly something going on in big groups. One of the guys who died he disappeared and was found in, I think, Lake Michigan after President Obama got elected in Chicago. Disappeared, found in water 40 days later. So, celebrations, things like that seem to be a trolling ground for people who are either inebriated or people who you can drug.
Yeah, that's true. Because even if you're not looking to murder somebody, those are places you would go to pick up, or someone, you go on a quick date, that kind of thing. So that does make sense. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, so I think that some people are driving to the big cities. It could be anything like that. But yeah, I don't think that. These cases are pretty. There's a lot of cases associated with festivals or concerts.
Yeah, because even when me and my daughter, when we went up to Kelseyville and up Northern California, then with the Bernie rally, he did this Bernie rally at this airport, this little tiny airport. That was the only thing going on in this town, and all the kids and the young teenagers and stuff like that from the town, they didn't know but that's where all the action was. So they all showed up there, and as everybody was leaving, you saw these towny kids getting all dressed up in makeup and stuff to come hang out down at the where all the action was, and it kind of creeped me out, like, hey, this isn't a good safe place to send your teenage kids to go hang out.
Well, there was another one. There was a guy by the name of James Corfield. He was a well-known Welsh kind of farming, kind of like, what are they, 4-H type thing in England, and he disappeared and was found in water just this year. So it's another one, a young guy, fits the profile. They're almost none of the victims are overweight. They're all like super either athletic or slim, and James Corfield was it. So, and this guy's like by, Bath and Bristol, which are both this kind of hot spot outside of London, west of London in the UK. He was about 2 hours outside of those places.
You mentioned UK. What about Steph Young? She's been into this whole thing, and she claims there's like a Nazi connection,
I didn't find that. I didn't find any Nazi in my research. I've researched this for a couple of years. I've read her books. I've read Paulides' book, which is Drowning in Coincidence, which surprisingly, I think we talked about that before. Yeah. He has all these cases. His chief cases are all these cases from Case Studies in Drowning Forensics, which is, a tacit nod to the expertise of Gannon and Gilbert. There's a recent one that just came out, kind of called Staggered Paths. You interviewed that guy, right? What was his name?
Spingola?
Spangola, right? So these books are out there.
Well, Spingola, I was shocked when I got him on the show. And it turns out he admitted. He said, because he didn't believe in the smiley face connection. He thought they were just accidental drownings, teenagers getting drunk. And so the whole interview was pretty much over in the first 5 minutes, And he admitted to me. He said, I said, well, did you write this book just to discredit the smiley face theory? And he goes, yeah, that was the purpose of writing the book.
Yeah, it's crazy. So he already had a preset.
Yeah.
Position. Yeah, it's amazing.
Then wait, it gets better, because then as we started talking, because he was up there where Jeffrey Dahmer was, then he starts excusing the whole Dahmer investigation and saying Dahmer had nothing going. Dahmer had an altar in his house with all kind of body parts, all kind of stuff in his house. He said in his confession, I did this, I ate the flesh, I drank the blood to get energy and to get power and to be more sociable, to get more, this is what he said he did. Then he has video cameras mounted in his house. Where's the videos? Oh, there's no videos. They were empty. Hey, what are you kidding me? Yeah.
It sounds like the Vegas investigation.
Yeah, that's all another thing. Yeah.
Well, let's not get into that. But that's interesting. So, Spagnola, I got an email just this week from Wisconsin. I can read it. He said, this is a guy who, let's see, one night in La Crosse, 2006, I was downtown, shorter, dark-haired, cute Latina, possibly native girl woman. She looked 21, approached me in a bar. She came up to me so fast, instantly asked if I wanted to leave the bar with her. She literally said, "Hey, you are perfect." She was anxious and something was strange about her motive. "Let's leave here," and proceeded to even check my ears. It gave me the creeps, and I told her she was weird and I'm not interested. I also think I remember a white van down there parked when I left the bar. I was rather intoxicated, though. I was known for too much drinking in my college years. This doesn't prove anything, but I swear something was different and off about this one. I told my friends. The reason that I didn't fixate on that, I would get borderline blackout drunk back down and know two things. You never leave without any friends. I would never accidentally drown in that river. I watched your videos, realized my theory wasn't so close to the other stories, it's overwhelming. So, that's a recent case of somebody from La Crosse, which is a hot spot down there. So,
yeah, and that's a tried and true tactic, flirty fishing. Where these cults, will send these girls in and flirt with you, and come on back, hey, come back to the, and the next thing you know, you're in the middle of you're in the middle
of a group, and that actually has happened in other cases where men are talking to women, guys who aren't gay, and then they're seen last. There was a case in Baltimore that I cover in my book, Downtown Baltimore. He's last seen talking to women, then he ends up in the water, ends up in the harbor. I mean, there's pretty crazy tie-ins to some of the cult activity because some of these cults that I know of do use women as bait.
Oh yeah, that's well documented. Now, one thing too. Now, over here in Vegas recently, we've had this situation with people on the hiking trails, usually women hiking alone, and they're being approached by a couple. The man's at one end and the woman's at the other end. And they're not even wearing hiking clothes. And they're saying to them, "Hey, are you hiking alone? Are you hiking alone?" And this is the whole thing going on over here lately. Anything on hiking trails?
No, nothing. I mean, I've only really covered, my kind of inquiry only dealt with men who disappeared and ended up in water. So that's really all I've covered. I'm not like some kind of Paulides where I do anybody who disappeared. I really am associated with this particular phenomenon. What's known as these cases. So not women, not people in national parks, right. Not, and then the reason is because none of these other cases have ever had this symbol of the smiley face associated with them. So other than maybe the happy face killer, this guy who was a trucker, which I think is another example of a serial killer who travels around. I forgot his name. He was the happy face killer, but he killed a bunch of prostitutes, but traveled. So it was hard for people to find that guy. He was a trucker. I don't know what was his name, but it was Keith Hunter Jesperson.
Right.
He was known as the happy because he drew smiley face. But that was the only other set of cases that I've come across that had this symbol associated with them. But these ones, and I prove in my documentary, and this is provable through case studies in drowning forensics, that these people are leaving these smiley faces at these deaths. There was one recently in Boston. There was one in Bristol. Deacon Wilkin, these are things that I document in the documentary.
And then why do you think the police aren't making this connection and trying to follow up these leads?
Well, that's a great question. I think that if there's it's kind of almost like the Richard Ramirez case where he was moving between jurisdictions and they never put it together. All of his jurisdictions were in California, but the jurisdictions for these deaths are multi-state, so, there's clearly, people have clearly made connections to what's going on in Wisconsin to New York, but it's almost like there's not enough back-to-back where they've connected it. Although the Philadelphia, this recent, what was his name? Casimir, this guy got busted for burying 3 or 4 men that he had abducted 12 feet deep. That's like one case where they realized that there was a thing. But like here in these cases, it's not like these abductions are happening it's like somebody's being like, the serial killer's thinking. There's a lot. And I actually show another case where there's clearly documented thinking about these abductions and murders by another guy who lived in the UK. But that's why I think the police are not, I think it's really an FBI. The FBI actually researched it and come to the conclusion that these were drownings, but they ignored so many facts, and they ignored the meaning of the smiley face. Most people, they don't understand the occult, where you can have a external, exoteric meaning and an esoteric meaning. So they kind of bungled that. And I talked to the ex-FBI agent D'Souza, who definitely believes it, and had some great warnings. If you want to look at my interview with him, he believes they're being abducted by very sophisticated people with bouncers and groups, So, but yeah, I think that the police, the FBI, and some of these, you can see from just current events that the FBI is not making the greatest decisions and seemingly corrupt. So, I definitely believe this phenomenon and the same modus operandi is taking place, where men are either drugged or abducted at night, kept somewhere, and then either killed and then thrown in water, or taken there and killed. I think most of them are probably pre-murdered.
Yeah. Now, what about you mentioned bouncers, and that's fascinating, because I had a guest on my show again, and when you booked, her son was killed in a bar, and his girlfriend was at the bar that night, and it was Halloween night.
There you go.
And his girlfriend was wearing a police uniform of a guy who worked as a bouncer in that bar that night. This guy's going in with his girlfriend. His girlfriend's wearing this other guy's outfit, And
that's part of the smiley. Those are part of the smiley face test. That's what's his name? It's Jenkins. You talked to Chris Jenkins.
Right.
Chris Jenkins' mom. So those are part of the smiley face killings. That he was part of it on Halloween. The bouncers were interviewed, and then they shut up. Yeah. So something weird was going on. He was acting fine, and then ended up acting drugged.
Yeah, in that case, the bouncer was a cop.
Water.
The bouncer was a cop.
Yeah, they're right. There was something weird, and his ex-girlfriend was angry at him or something like that.
Right.
Zach Marr was the same thing. Zach Marr walked out of a bar in downtown Boston, and the bouncers didn't let him back in. His family said that he sent a text that the bouncers wouldn't let him back in. The establishment said the bouncers did let him back in. There was no evidence of him walking back through the door, and then he disappeared. Zach Marr ended up in the water.
Which reminds me of the preppy killer in New York, who was he also worked as a bouncer, by the way, at that Dorian's Tavern. It was a real singles club back in those days, back in the 80s. He killed that girl, and then later on, that family who owned that bar, it turns out they own like 20% of all the liquor licenses in Manhattan now. That family is so powerful in New York. And they had a girl who worked in their bar who disappeared. And again, there was video, the same pattern over and over again.
Interesting. Yeah.
But
it's dangerous to be in those bars late at night drunk, I got to tell you.
Yeah.
Their predators are out there. Maybe 1 in 100, but clearly these cases show that the predators are out there,
Let me ask you a question. Now, we're going to be coming up to the break of the hour. Can you give me like another 15, 20 minutes after the break? Okay, great.
Yeah, no problem.
Now, what about, have there ever been an arrest in these cases, ever?
Yes, in similar cases, yes. And I talk about them in my documentary. Almost remarkably exactly similar to the MO.
Well, how many arrests then?
Well, I document 2.
Okay, 2 arrests. Now, those people who are arrested, any connections to other people, groups, or
Well,
cults?
that's a great question. One of the guys I talk about in the case clearly was at gay parties. He said he was at kind of these sex parties where people get loaded. And he was actually, before he got caught, he was a cruiser or whatever, a gay prostitute.
Right.
So, these people are connected. This guy was on TV shows. He was known, in that area in London, and GHBing and drugging people, the same thing. But really remarkable, because in a lot of ways, this one case, who you'll have to see the documentary about it, but he got away with all. The police bungled the case after case after case. The family of one of the victims were the people who caught him, believe it or not. Then the police went through an inquest and said, oh my God, there's all these other cases he was involved in. And the police got censured. A lot of people, I don't know, it just recently happened. I don't know if they lost their jobs, but they said it was something like they had to go back and look at another 100 cases to see how many people were gotten drugged and abused by this guy. So, really really intense levels of abuse.
Okay, we're coming to a break. We're with William Ramsey. You can listen to his radio show, William Ramsey Investigates. It's on at Saturday nights at 7 p.m. We're talking about the Smiley Face Killers. You can find this video on Vimeo. And now a word from our sponsors. Archival Revival, the Christian Film Archive, is currently paying for vintage Christian films. They are dedicated to preserving and restoring classic Christian films and media. So if you have an original prints, negatives, or other film elements of classic Christian films, or you have audio recording masters for classic Christian record albums, they want to buy them from you. So email archival.revival@gmail.com, and they're going to make you an offer. Archival Revival wants to preserve these classic Christian films so that they continue saving people for years. These films have brought people to salvation. They want to continue that. Their staff has decades of experience in handling and preserving of film elements, and they utilize the very best climate-controlled film storage facilities around the world. Contact them today at archival.revival@gmail.com. If there's someone you know has these prints, negatives, recording masters, or other materials from vintage Christian films, you can check out their blog at archivalrevival.blogspot.com. Now, just so you understand, Archival Revival wants to pay you for these films. So you can look in your church attic, in the church basement. If you have a friend who runs a Christian youth ministry or these youth vacation Bible study camps, they have these old films in those big metal containers, 16 millimeter and 35 millimeter. Archival Revival wants to buy them from you. So this is a sponsor that actually wants to give you money. And all you have to do is contact them, tell them what you have. If you're in the UK or Ireland or Africa, these films are all over the world, and they're gathering dust, and they're going to deteriorate if they don't get into the hands of Archival Revival. So that's archival.revival@gmail.com, or the blog spot is archivalrevival.blogspot.com. Don't forget, this show is brought to you by pscoco.com. Phoebe Sod is an independent curator with the Cocoa Exchange. The Cocoa Exchange is formerly known as Dove Chocolate Discoveries, and they make the finest silky smooth chocolate because the products start with the best cocoa beans, which are tested for quality and flavor by expert technicians. The Cocoa Exchange offers not just premium chocolates, but anything from sauces and spices to brownie and cake mixes, and even coffee and martini mixes. If you wish to treat yourself or someone you love to a sweet and tasty gift, then the Cocoa Exchange is the brand for you. So you go to pscoco.com, you click on the Shop Now button. You can see all their beautiful chocolates. You can order it right now tonight. It could be in your mailbox in a couple of days. Or if you want to get into the chocolate business, you want to be a chocolatier just like Phoebe Sod, you can click the Contact Us button, and you can learn how to get your own website, go into the cocoa chocolate business, and sell chocolate and make a little bit of money there. Remember, all these shows on Awake are brought to you by emailrevealer.com. You can go to emailrevealer.com and get a copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. But you also do all the kind of different services for you. An online dating service investigation. It's called an online infidelity investigation. And that's where you give us your husband or your boyfriend, your girlfriend's email address, and we trace it back to their online dating websites, and we return a list of all the dating sites that email is registered to. We can expand on that investigation and trace it back to porn sites, escort service sites, swinger sites, even gambling websites, and even prescription drug websites. If you think your ex-husband or something is addicted to prescription medication or involved in a extreme online pornography addiction, we can produce a report for you that you can use in court. Adoption investigations. If you want to locate your birth parents or your birth child you gave away for adoption, we can do adoption investigations for you. Asset searches for you. Locate bank accounts, hidden assets, hidden properties, hidden income, all different kinds of services in the asset search investigation. Email tracing. If you need to locate or identify somebody from just an email address, we can do an email trace investigation for you, and all kinds of digital forensics, computer and cell phone digital forensics, where we can recover deleted content from an email or a hard drive and produce a report for you that you can use in court. That's emailrevealer.com, or you can contact me at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com.
Prepare your mind to experience American Freedom Radio.
It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. We're here talking today with William Ramsey, who just put out a 3-hour documentary film about the Smiley face killers. Now, William, we left off. He said that they did arrest 2 guys, and one was in England. Where was the other one?
I think it was Minnesota. Yeah, it was Minnesota.
Minnesota, okay. And now, have they ever arrested anybody in the process of disposing the body in water?
Not to my knowledge, never.
Okay. Or in the process of drowning somebody in water?
They've never arrested anybody associated with that, no. But you can go online. I mean, if you really are adventurous, you can watch some of these fetish videos where men are drowning other men. You know, and I include this one video called Kink, which is on Netflix. I think it was produced by James Franco, where it's like a good 10 minutes, just men just drowning the crap out of other men. It's crazy. So, you know, you can see that's part of the, you know, black toolbox of some of these fetish people.
Okay, that's fascinating. That's one I hadn't heard of. Okay, now, and that's interesting, too, because there's a connection to West Memphis Street, too. When they kill those little boys, they submerge them in water. What's the occult significance to that?
Well, I think that there's like an alternate level of sacrifice where you don't actually like do an Aztec sacrifice. You drown them in water. And it was supposed to be, Gary Meese, who talked about the West Memphis Three, I think I read this about the West Memphis Three from him, which is it's like a druid sacrifice. And you drown the body, like disperse the spirit into the water. And there's actual witch kind of simulated sacrifices of videos that I've seen of Kenneth Anger and Lucifer Rising, where they drowned like human symbols in water. And then also there's a video of the King of Witches. His name, I can't remember his name now, but there's a video of him doing a witch ritual. I think you can see it on my website on William Ramsey Investigates. He drowns like a human-made object in water. And it's interesting, too, because during the Pizzagate thing, you know, they talk about this Hadrian's young gay lover Antinous was drowned in the Nile supposedly by Hadrian, and so there's kind of like a weird homosexual aspect to this too.
Yeah, and Alefantis uses his profile
his
picture.
His icon was Antinous or Antinous.
Fascinating.
The so-called old world ideal gay lover, right, or something of Hadrian.
It's right in your face, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing.
Now, which reminds me of what I was going to bring up before the break, is because we always talk about in these cases, in these different serial killer cases and stuff. I'll be talking to the Program to Kill guy tomorrow, Dave McGowan's work. And what seems to be common in this case is this idea that the police are bungling. They bungled the investigation, you know? But I think I've talked to you about my theory before, that there's something about these blood sacrifices that and I know if you look at the Matamoros case down there in Mexico, that cult down there that was killing people for their drug operation, which was much bigger than it was ever publicized. But Jane was it Jesus? What was his name?
Jesus, I forgot, but he was definitely connected to the Mexico City elite. He used to be a tarot reader for them.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Oh, yeah. And they found other houses nearby too with the kids' clothing and shoes and stuff like that, in the abandoned house. Yeah. Absolutely. So now, and then they just stopped looking.
Well, they stopped looking. It got actually worse because he had a connection. One of his sidekicks was this woman Aldretti, who was able to cross the border to the U.S. She was actually going, I think, to college in South Texas, and she had blood, like sacrificial blood, on her walls in the U.S. they found blood on that. So how did that get there too?
Yeah, right.
So these guys, and she was weird. I mean, there are videos of her, Aldrete, where she's like popping in and out of personalities and stuff like that. The reason they got caught in Matamoros is one of these guys went around a roadblock thinking he was invisible. He literally thought that the black magic gave him invisibility, and the police followed him back to the compound.
That's what I was going to get to. See, I've always tried to get a book of guests to do a show about that Matamoros thing, because I was down around that area when that stuff was going on, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, that there's supposedly other connections that corridor in North Mexico has been associated with supposedly black magic and nasty stuff from the conquistador conquest in the 16th century. So at that time, like, that goes way back.
Absolutely. That all those guys believe that they're invisible to the police. They can get away with their crimes. And we were thinking the cops are bungling the investigation. See, but I have a theory that there is something to this, just like with the West Memphis 3 crowd, with their blood sacrifice, that they can get people to believe their lies, and they can get people to lie for them. It's this thing that they got. And you see it yourself dealing with these people.
Oh, yeah, no question. Yeah, I mean, they mind controlled like a huge hordes of people who just respat, PR talking points like they were real. They believe it. I mean, believing all these lies. Oh, man, these guys were wearing a Metallica T-shirt and they got arrested for wearing black. That's what, and there's all this tons of other evidence, but these people will restate that like Manson family zombie. I mean, it's incredible. So, yeah, I totally believe your opinion that that's part of the black magic, is to deceive other people and get them to do your bidding.
Right. So when we look at these cops and we're saying that they're bungling, I think that they're under that spell, Yeah,
I think you're right. I think they're under the spell that nothing's happening, that it's a lie. And I think that some of this black magic definitely, and you'll see it in my documentary, pervades these what's known as the smiley face killings.
Yeah, and another thing, too, with the West Memphis 3, they'll be so rude about it, too. They're just so nasty and rude right out the gate. Anybody who disagrees with their cult mentality is just the stupidest person on the face of the earth and just doesn't know a damn thing. And that's like
a witch hunter, all this stuff.
Yeah, it's like a spirit. It's a demon throughout the group. And you got to admit, man, in the last 4 years, the work we've done together on that, we've totally exposed the occult aspect to that, because it was never brought up in the old days. Everybody poo-pooed it, and the blood drinking, all the stuff that went on there, man.
Right. Oh, yeah. I agree. I mean, I definitely congratulate you for taking that case on too, because it takes a lot of courage.
Yeah, and I congratulate you as well.
Respect you for that.
Yeah, because we've turned the corner on that thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you were supposed to be like a Salem witch hunter if you even said the occult was involved in that case. You were like, a crazy nut job, even though the guy loves Crowley and loves Crowley. He's writing a book actually about magic right now.
To this day, we just unsurfaced the guy. Well, I think it was me who found him. The guy who found that guy? It was me, right? With the book, with
Which
the
guy?
storage locker.
Oh yeah. No, that was that was us. Yeah, you interviewed him. But yeah, 2,500 books on the occult, right?
Yeah, that's true. No, we actually worked on that together. We found that together at the same time. I found the article, and you found the guy. Yeah, so
that's right. Yeah, you got his email.
Yeah.
So I mean, there it is. 2,500 books on the occult, plus throwing some BDSM and something where he writes, "I am the devil." Right. So I don't know how people are ever going to get around that if they ever read that it's in his writing that he writes, "I am the devil."
Yeah.
Not the devil. I am the devil. So,
right. Not a devil. The devil.
Devil. Right.
Oh my God!
But yeah, these guys. I mean, the Matamoros thing, it was very strange, and it's a lot like the West Memphis 3 and other. Well, you got to watch the documentary because I include somebody who is defined as a black magician in it, and I think it's a riveting aspect of this whole case that nobody's ever talked about. I mean, there's stuff in the documentary that nobody who studied these cases ever talked about, but I think you'll find that it's interesting. But how these guys are connected, whether it's Damien Eccles, this guy. Jesus Adolfo Costanza, the guy from Matamoros, how he was connected to the elite there. And I mean, there's a lot in the documentary that nobody's ever talked about in relationship to these cases.
How'd you find this black magician?
Well, you have to watch the documentary.
I'd say a lot of people. I don't believe in that theory that if you tell too much about the book or the documentary, that it sells less books. I think you actually sell more. I think the more you talk about it, the more you sell. But I know people have different philosophies.
Well, I like to talk about a little bit of it.
Yeah.
I like to definitely leave out. I mean, there's a lot in it's a 3.5 hour work I've taken a year to put out, but I think that, there's a lot of people who's flown under the radar that, the alternative research community have never really talked about, people of import. And I think I included one of them in the documentary. I do a good 20, 30 minutes on just one guy.
How much do you think, like, just like we were talking at the beginning of the show, or maybe it was off the air, about how the alternative media, which is, in some cases is turning into the alternative reality media, but the alternative media, is just so, they're just being manipulated and just maneuvered and manipulated every possible way. What do you think about, I'm starting to notice, and getting further suspicious by the day, these true crime authors who seem to be publishing a cover story over and over.
Well, that's a great point. That's what we discovered about Robert Horn. One of the fascinating aspects of that whole locker storage is that the so-called author of record,
right,
Leverett, is in contact with Damien and his wife, girlfriend, whatever, 3 years or 4 years before the publication of the book of Record Devil's Knot, which leaves out all kinds of important information. It's basically a half-truth. It's incredible. And in those storage lockers, Damien Eccles and his girlfriend, Lori Davis, had a pre-copy of Devil's Knot. They had like the publisher's copy, even before it went public. So it's incredible. So that's a perfect example. And then you go through some of these other cases, you wonder what they're leaving out. I've seen other things about the West Memphis Street. This guy, Jared, is like, this is just a freaking work of fiction, bro. You've left out so much important stuff. No timeline, no details. It's just like you're just coming up with stuff. So you get a lot of fellow travelers, I suspect. And what books are you referencing that seem to cover up true crimes?
The serial killer cases, they always leave out the connections to other killers, to group, the satanic cults, to other people helping. Like the BTK had to have had help. Bundy had to have help, and Bundy talks about having help. Bundy talks about being involved with others who were much more professional than him, that had furnaces in their basements to dispose of bodies.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
they all pretty much talk about it. They say that there were other people involved almost every time.
And Berkowitz, for example, they just zeroed in on Berkowitz. That was it. That's clearly a cult crime.
Yeah, I don't think you can get much more obvious than Berkowitz. And then you still have TV specials. Or just the 40th anniversary just came out, and you'll have specials and just breeze right over that. And they'll even have on. They had on the sister of. They had Weed Carr on, who's the sister of these guys, and they have her on the show. Talking about,
did she say that they were involved?
Oh no, she says nothing happened.
Right. Interesting. Yeah, it's amazing. I think the cold aspects or the connected aspects of some of these crimes are. There's the same. There's like have you ever read about the Beast of Florence that fit the same kind of MO as the Berkowitz crimes?
No, I have not. No.
So there's a Beast of Florence. There's a book written about it, but there were a series of killings that were up in the hills, that were lovers in cars, that, body parts were removed, really strange stuff happened, but it fits the whole thing of what happened with the Burke or Son of Sam killings, because there's there may be some black magic stuff involved in groups. Like how does one person control two people? And there's scenes where it's pretty clear that two of them got away. How did they both get captured? So they've keyed into this one guy, Roberto. There's an Italian last name, I can't pronounce it, but they're like, he's the only one who did it, who got all these 7 couples or whatever. That's been happening in the hills of Florence for 2 decades. So it's just another strange series of cases.
Yeah, and again, it's that zombie-like mind control that they can get over their victims. Now, how high do you think this goes? Because
smiley face killers?
No, not just smiley face. All this stuff, this whole pattern of serial killers and the smiley face killers and these cults and stuff. Because you hear about so many times that these people involved with, they have military connections and intelligence connections. And how high do you think this goes?
It's hard to think. I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised that some of these politicians and these political groups have house killers, to do what they need to do. I wouldn't be surprised at all. Like something from, some kind of old, feudal lord, has some kind of their own fixer, So I wouldn't be surprised if some of these guys are working tandem or a serial killer or anything like that. I don't know. How far do you think it goes?
I think it goes. I believe now that the Pentagon itself uses black magic as part of warfare.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised, because it's the whole thing about lying, deception, right? So you deceive even the population of the United States while you're deceiving your enemies too, right?
Right.
It's not part of the program. You're deceiving everybody.
And look back at the Phoenix program from Vietnam, where they were putting heads on sticks and they were raping kids in front of torturing people by kidnapping their families and raping the kids in front of the torture victims. Same thing they did in Abu Ghraib. You know, it hasn't stopped or even slowed down. And they're talking about, even with Abu Ghraib, that they were sending those pictures or videos of this torture and stuff going up to the White House every night.
It's so crazy. It's so crazy.
It really is, man.
That means Bush is watching it, right?
Well, Cheney was the one, allegedly, that was looking at that stuff.
Well, did you ever hear the rumor about George Bush's attachment to Matamoros and that whole area, Rio Grande Blood?
No, I don't know about that, but also too, he pardoned that guy O'Toole.
Right. No, it was a Toole's associate. It was what was it? Otis Toole, right?
Right, and we know the other guy. Yeah, but tell me about the connection to the blood, because obviously the Bushes were involved with the Mexican drug lords, because the first person they have, the first guest he had to the White House was Vicente Fox. So yeah, come on.
It was Henry Lee Lucas was the guy he pardoned, and Texas was like a slaughterhouse. Like the death penalty was just churning, the machinery was grinding through. Yeah. So Rio Grande Blood was a rumor that when George Bush Jr. disappeared, he went AWOL from his National Guard post or whatever.
Yeah.
But he went AWOL to the area around Matamoros and was in one of those cults. And there's a band called Ministry. Just One Fix, Rio Grande Blood, New World Order, some of their things. Their whole album, Rio Grande Blood, is about that. It's about George Bush being down there in one of these blood cults.
Do you have somebody I can interview on that?
Nope. You can call Al Jorgensen of Ministry and ask why he did it. The interesting thing is that album was it was underviewed. Actually, nobody really bought Rio Grande Blood, that Ministry album, but it was nominated for a Grammy. It was one of 5 top albums in one category. I can't remember what category it was, but the people who were making that nomination really liked Rio Grande Blood.
What do you think about, you hear these stories about that the master recordings are involved in satanic rituals and stuff? What do you think of that?
Master recordings? What do you mean?
Yeah, like the music studios, before they release a recording, they take the master copies and they conduct a ritual over them.
Oh, I've heard that happens in some of the African American hip hop stuff.
Yeah, I would believe
That's what I heard. A lot of those people are into that kind of occult stuff. They come from those families. Here, look at this screen cap of the album cover for Ministry. See who that is.
Oh, you just sent it to me?
Bunch of oil tank. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that looks like fun. Yeah, they're into something for sure, yeah. And too, you mentioned, we're talking about the masters of the recordings, the music recordings. Did you ever see that documentary about McAfee, the guy from the virus?
Yeah.
About how he killed
about him? The one where the body popped up between his house or something like that?
Oh, yeah, no, he was definitely involved in a murder. He had drug gangs down there, murdering for him down there in Belize.
McAfee did.
Yeah. Oh, there's a great documentary about it. You got to watch it. You can watch it online. It's available. But they talk in this documentary, and I tried to find people from the documentary to come on the show. I couldn't get anybody yet. But that in his office, when they were first in his tiny little office, when they had 6 or 7 people there working in his office, they had a resident witch working there, putting spells over his antivirus scan software. This is when they sent them out. Yeah, incredible. And I was like the biggest one in the whole world.
Incredible. So here's the thing. This is Rio Grande Blood by Ministry. The album contains allegations of the Bush administration complicity in the 9/11 attacks in the track Lies, 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 which contains audio samples from the conspiracy documentary Loose Change. The song received a nomination for Best Metal Performance at the 49th Annual Grammy Awards.
And is this band like a known band? I never heard of them.
Yeah, Ministry? Yeah, But
really?
they were one of the first industrial music bands. I wonder if I can play the intro to Rio Grande Blood. It's really something else. I wonder if it'll play through here. Let me see if I can get it. What's that?
Give it a try, yeah.
All right, here we go. Let's see. Let me know if you can hear it. Hold on just a sec. Okay, hold on a second. Yes. All right, listen.
Now, a message from the President of the United States.
Can you hear that?
Yeah, it sounds great.
Can you hear that, Ed?
Yeah, it sounds great. Oh,
And now,
yeah, it sounds great.
from the President of the United States, George W. Bush.
I have adopted sophisticated terrorist tactics, and I'm a dangerous, dangerous man with dangerous, dangerous weapons. I want to drain the coal resources in America and foreign sources of crude oil. I am a weapon of mass destruction. I'm a brutal dictator, and I'm the easiest one.
Yeah, that's creepy, man.
Like that. So I'm a brutal dictator. I'm evil. I want to bring the full resources of America and foreign sources of crude oil. And you can see on the album cover, they're pretty keyed in, those guys, because they have the 322, the number of the Brotherhood of Death, right there on the album cover.
But that's the only indication you have that Bush was connected to Matamoros?
It was a rumor. There was an old article that you can find online that talks about him and that the entire operation down there in Matamoros was destroyed and everybody was killed.
Yeah.
That's what we're referencing in ministry. And I think Jorgensen lives in Texas somewhere, Houston or something like that.
Yeah. It's very hard to find online material still around about that Matamoros operation.
There's clearly a memory hole. Things have been disappeared. In my book, Children of the Beast, I had the whole allegations of the pedophilia in Sri Lanka by, what was that author?
Arthur C. Clarke.
Arthur C. Clarke. And luckily, I screenshotted everything and kept it, but it's gone. You can't find it. It was in a Murdoch newspaper, and it's gone. Literally, you can look up Arthur C. Clarke pedophile allegation Sri Lanka. You can't find there was a whole series of documents where he admits that he likes to go to these ping pong, here it is, another, tie into Comet ping pong, but he liked to go to ping pong parlors and pay these young boys money for sex.
Well, there was a documentary about him, like Discovery Channel, something like that, I remember. This is way before the allegations came out. And he showed him living in Sri Lanka, and they showed him walking up to his door of his little shack. The guy lived like on a shack down there, and all these little boys are playing out in front. And I remember seeing that thinking, well, why does this guy live in Sri Lanka, and what's going on with these kids? And I've never seen it again, and I looked for it. It's, where'd it go? It's just...
Things get memory hold. I've seen things. There was a really graphic picture of Arnold Schwarzenegger that he was with some girl. You ever see that picture?
No, I've heard about it, though.
Yeah, it's gone. I can't find it. I couldn't even find it on one of my old emails. It's just like somebody went on the internet and hit a button, and that picture of him with... it's a very graphic picture. I'm sure, he would definitely want that just for familial reasons off of the internet. But, I can't even find that anymore.
Yeah, just like there's a picture of Bill Menser holding a machine gun in front of a pentagram, and it's the same pentagram behind him as the same one as that Mapplethorpe is posed in front of. So,
They're all gone. Yeah, there's definitely a memory hole.
Yeah.
You can solve up. I'm trying to keep as much video from the Vegas massacre as possible because all that stuff is getting scraped. And two of my videos got taken down by YouTube for very bogus reasons. So there's covering up something. I don't know what's going on. The story keeps changing, but
yeah, I'm pretty sure it's that the cops shot the security guard is what the cover up is about.
He's keeping his mouth shut, right? That guy, Jesus Compost or whatever.
Yeah. Well, I'll talk to you a little bit off the air when we get a chance, because I'm really listen. If anything's going to happen, if any news is going to come out about this thing, I'll definitely hear about it. I know enough people who are really tuned in to what's going on with this that if any real thing comes out, I'll know about it.
Right, but why did it take 72 minutes to get all the way up there?
Because the cops here are cowards. Okay,
Doesn't the Mandalay Bay have 200 security guards?
Yeah, but there's a story here. No, not a story. It's in the news where these guys came into Bellagio to rob a watch store, and they came in firing guns on the way in. Got nothing. When they're trying to leave, their car doesn't even start. One of them steals another. They all got away. Their car doesn't start, and they get away. It's Keystone Cops, And so many cases. When the cops pull me over, they'll wait for backup. They'll wait 10 minutes for backup. And this is my neighborhood is like I don't even lock my doors. Did I
ever tell you my Vegas cop story?
No, go ahead.
So I was in there for a bachelor party 10 years ago, and we were done at a bar. It was like 2:30 in the middle of the night, and so we had to stop and get gas. And in the middle of the street, there's this big truck, and it stopped. And behind the truck is like a BMW, and the guy gets out of the BMW to go talk to the guy in the truck, and they're having this very fevered. It looked like, I figured out later that they must have been at a bar together, and then it chased out onto the middle of the street. And this is west of the Strip. And so we're out there watching, and they're just arguing, and there's girls in the car. There's another guy and two girls in the truck, and another guy and two girls in the other car. And they're arguing for a good 4 minutes, and the guy keeps motioning at the back of his back like he's grabbing a gun. I can tell he has no gun, but he's antagonizing the guy in the truck. And the other guy in the back car gets out, not the truck, to join the argument. And something happens where everything clicks, and the guy in the truck pushes his door and pushes the guy who supposedly had a gun, onto the street. Guy gets out. He's at least 6'6". He's wearing huge, like, toed boots with, a good inch. He's wearing, like, hiking boots. And they start fighting. And the big guy, the other guy doesn't have a chance. The guy in the truck starts beating him up. The guy who was threatening him outside of the truck is on his hands and knees, and this huge dude kicks his head like a football. Like, literally, people gasp, like, oh! And he was done. His face was literally on the two yellow lines in the center of the road. And the other guy, they're fighting. The guy gets back in the truck with his buddy and his girls and speed off. And the guy's laying face down, and he's bleeding out of his nose onto the yellow stripes at the center of the road. And my buddy's trying to get the guy in the truck to stop. And the cops show up about, 3 minutes later, not too late. And they get out of the car, and they just kind of stare around and don't do anything. And everybody's like, the cop just went down and the truck just went west down here. Yeah. If you speed up, you get him. The cop's like, yeah, doesn't pull out his gun, doesn't pull out to take notes, and just stands there and watches as the paramedics come in and pick the guy and scrape him off the center of the street. I was looking in the newspapers to see if he was dead because he wasn't moving. And later, like 2 or 3 days later, I kept watching to see what happened to this dude. But the cops just sat there, and people were like, go get him. He just drove up. The truck just drove off. Go get him. And this guy literally could have had brain damage. And the two cops literally, once the paramedics drove off, they just got in the car and drove off. They didn't take any notes, didn't take any pictures. This was like a major assault, man. It was incredible. And all of us in the car were like, what are you cops doing? Aren't you going to do anything? We were just in shock that nothing even happened,
Yeah, well, I think I've told you.
Names, didn't take any reports. We saw the whole thing.
No kidding. Well, at the case where they shot Eric Scott, who was a West Point graduate, they shot him coming out of Costco because he was a licensed concealed carry firearm permit. But some guy in Costco saw a gun on him, and they evacuated Costco because there's a West Point grad was carrying a gun, and they shot him. And then they told all the witnesses, "Get the hell out of here! Nothing to see here. Go!" And then they went inside and they destroyed the Costco videotape. So this stuff goes on, and everybody knows about it. So people talking about this stuff. This is a big cover. This stuff goes on here every day. They shot the little lady, 90-pound woman who sold ice cream to my kid. They shot her in front of witnesses. So this business, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised. I mean, a lot of these cops not trained very well. I don't.
Well, that's another thing too, because here, like you're from California. LAPD has a history. They have your uncle's LAPD, your cousin's LAPD, your father, your grandfather. New York, same thing. You come from cop families. Everyone here
I live close to the airport, and there's cops who live close to me who work in Inglewood. One guy has 6 confirmed kills. He retired recently, and one of the kills was he ran over somebody with a car. So he kept his job, killed 6 people. God knows how many other people he beat up. And in Inglewood, the cops will get out of the car. They draw their gun, and they will tap it against the window. That's how they talk to people there. Yeah. So the gun is already out, and they go, tink, 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 tink. Can I see your eyes? It's crazy. It's like the Wild West, certain parts of L.A., and the cops keep their jobs. Actually, that Inglewood chief of police went to work for Santa Monica, so she was like a step up. They never questioned anything that happened in Inglewood.
Well, look at the Furman tapes where, he confesses to all the stuff, kicking in doors and stuff. And then they went back and looked, and all those things really happened. All those things he was saying on those tapes really happened. And he's a spokesman on Fox News.
I went to a police, somebody I know became a cop. And so I went to the swearing in, which is east of town. And this is all for the LA cops. And the guy who was the head at the time he went to jail for lying and deceiving. I can't remember. DeBaca was the chief of police here. DeBaca got busted and put in jail. I was looking right at that guy's face, 7 years ago.
Yeah, well, Bernie Carrick, who was the cop in charge of 9/11, he went to prison.
Wow.
Bernard Carrick, and it's just
God knows what else they get away with. That's the whole thing. Is that this is probably the 10th thing they've done that's super illegal, and they just get busted for it.
Well, Bernie Carrick too. He was known because when he was the head of the Department of Corrections, and he left there, he stole all the artwork out of the office, and this is everyone knows these stories. This is all stuff that everybody knows. Benjamin Ward, who was the first black police commissioner in New York, his son was a heroin addict in uniform, doing stick-ups, going in and sticking up liquor stores, man, in uniform, and every cop in New York knows this story. Yeah.
So crazy.
I know.
Those cops, some of the cops in certain districts in LA are making lawyer money. They make like $125,000 base plus all kinds of stuff. When they retire, they get 80% of their salary. So their incentive is to retire, get done with your 25 years and retire right away.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the firefighters here in Henderson, most of them live up in Utah. They're making like $200,000 a year, In
certain districts here in LA, none of the actual firemen or the cops live in these upscale communities. They live in super rich. They're in Rancho Palos Verdes, where the houses are like millions of dollars because they're making a killing, and they actually have enough juice to put in their own people into the city councils, so they can sway these politicians and pay and support the ones who are going to make sure that they make fat salaries.
Yeah, that's right. They had the voting block. They're a voting block, The police
block, and they can pay, for somebody else. They can take the fat money that they're making and pay for PR and stuff like that for people they support, and that will support them.
Oh, boy. Do you see any hope out of all this?
I think actually, it goes back to just talking about and exposing people who are malefactors, because then people will make decisions based upon that. Because a lot of these guys, the media is not doing a good job. The American media, the corporate media, doesn't do any investigative journalism. They don't do crap, and it's a shame. So I think that bringing things to light is really going to be the American public's best interest, and specifically for the smiley face killers. You got to be careful. Even if you're a man, if you go look at all the people who are victims and you look like one of them, be careful at a night out at a bar. Don't be left alone. Don't trust anybody with a drink. If some girl comes up to you, don't, trust your drink, because you can get drugged. And a lot of those victims, it's not merely a gay thing. It's like, you could just be out with your friends.
Oh, yeah. It's very common for big guys, especially in Vegas here, too. But even in New York, too, you get rolled. They put the little drugs in your drink. They take you back to the room. They take your wallet and stuff.
Those are the lucky ones. Those are the ones who only get rolled by a pretty girl. Those are the lucky ones, because some of these people are getting drugged, and it's not a girl, and, you'll end up in the water. So this is happening. There's no doubt. Done enough research to know that. I mean, there's probably 100, 200 cases, actually. I only cover over 50 in my documentary, but it's still happening. There's recent cases. This guy Casper McLeod or whatever, and he was in Manchester, James Corfield. These are still, there's probably 25 a year. There's another kid by the name of Practico who disappeared, fits the profile. They haven't found his body yet, but he's been missing for a month. So I'll be careful. It's like the police aren't doing a proper job of warning people. And I think this is a really important. It's important for people to understand these cases right away, because I advise in my documentary, when young men disappear and found in water 15 days later, they should be treated immediately like a murder case, not as an accidental drowning, which is what they're being treated as now. I think that's a mistake.
What about, though, because we talk about how a lot of these things that they're doing, like Harvey Weinstein, and they do this stuff and they get away with it, and everybody knows they're doing it for years and years, and it's kind of open joke. And it's kind of like they're laughing in our faces. And even like when they do get
big smiley face, right?
Right. Now, what's the occult significance to that? Isn't there an element to that in the occult that they're rubbing it in our faces?
I think so. What some people have called it there's a certain term for that. But yeah, I think that, there's like the occultans that influence the Masons and influence Crowley, and is represented by the Sphinx, like you see that at the very end of Kenneth Anger's Lucifer Rising, is to know, and it's actually those Sphinxes and that actually it ties back into Berkowitz with that park with the Sphinxes on it. What park is that they all met at?
Undermeyer Park.
Undermeyer Park, right. So that's all laid out on a cult with the Sphinx, but it's to know, to will, to dare, and remain silent. So these are the doctrines of, one of the central, or one of the many doctrines of the occultists or black magicians, is to know, to do it, to will, to have the will to do it, to dare, and then keep your mouth shut. So you could actually brush by people who are serious, killers, or like all the Smiley face kind of to not even know it. Never tell you unless you're in that mix. So
interesting about Undermeyer Park. Stone, and there's stuff in there. There's a stairway to Saturn in there. There's all that thing's a cult galore.
Yeah.
And there's all those stones were brought over from England to build Undermeyer Park.
Yeah, it's laid out on occult significance. There's like the water. There's the globe. Isn't there a globe with like a directional pointer or whatever?
Oh yeah, and Undermeyer, if you look him up, he was one of the founders of the Federal Reserve.
Right. Yeah, and supposedly he was an occultist, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That'd be it.
So that's why people who are involved in the process were there. Yeah? Didn't you say that? Didn't Timothy Wiley, number 3, who I covered in Children of the Beast, he died and went back east, right?
Yeah, I got that. That he died and he left his hospice to go back east. And it's kind of interesting because there's just so much double agents, you might call them, who kind of release this information. You don't know if you can trust them 100% or what. This info, who knows what, But that's something that was told to me directly by someone who would know.
Yeah, he was probably the highest ranking member of the process that was still alive. He was number 3. So if what was his name, Robert de Grimston and his wife, if they're on, then he was number 3.
Oh boy, yeah, I just had that guy on who wrote the book about Manson, and he was another apologist too for these characters. It's just
but he was also, that guy was also involved in that process documentary too.
Right. Yeah, he was friends with Wiley. Oh boy.
Crazy world, man. There's a lot of stuff going on under the surface that people, that the mass media is not covering.
Yeah, that's for sure. And you can't, because I just told you about it. I just had that offer come to me with those Vice TV guys, and they don't want to touch any of that stuff. They just they'll touch the regular stuff, but none of that kind of stuff.
What were they trying to sell you on?
Opperman Report on TV.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
Vice TV is huge. I think who owns Vice? Who bought Vice? Somebody bought Vice recently. Murdoch?
It's definitely compromised for sure. But these are people involved with Vice, who like the show. But William, I guess I've taken enough of your time today. What do you want to leave us with?
Just keep an eye out for the documentary. I'm going to upload it today or tomorrow on Vimeo. And it's 3.5 hours of information probably you haven't seen, with analysis, pictures, video, that comprises these cases, and I think proves conclusively that these are not accidental drownings, that not all of these people were drunk and fell in water. And I go into these cases, talk about the smiley face, talk about the cult significance, and lay out individuals who are involved in these types of murders and people who've been arrested. And I talk. There's a lot of the occult in there, but it's. I think it's gonna show things conclusively that these are clearly people being abducted.
Okay, William, thank you so much, man. As soon as it's available, I'll download it and check it out, and
awesome.
I'll reveal all the secrets. Everybody, all the secrets that he wouldn't tell us today, I'm going to tell it. I'll tell next week.
Well, once you see it, you'll understand. You'll understand what.
Thank you, brother. Thank you so much, man.
God bless.
Good night. God bless you.
Yep.
All right, they had William Ramsey talking about his new film about the smiley face killers, but William got great stuff too. Check out, just Google William Ramsey and his book about the 9/11 cult significance of 9/11, and his book on West Memphis 3. Great stuff, man. A book about Crowley. He was talking about how this group, how they travel across the country and stuff like that. And there's a story I've been meaning to tell. I was going to tell it Friday night, but then my guest today, we were supposed to have the Open Secret on today. There's a film out there called An Open Secret about pedophilia in Hollywood, and it was directed by Amy Berg, who also directed one of the West Memphis 3 apologist movies, and very interesting. And a lot of people are walking around now saying, well, Amy Berg, she couldn't get this produced, and she wanted to do this. The real story is that after it was produced and was created and was being she wouldn't promote it, is the real story. So she did this film and then wouldn't promote it. A lot of interesting stuff about this film. It talks, Todd Bridges from Different Strokes is in it, and he talks about how he was molested. I personally know someone else who has connections to Different Strokes, and her husband was molested too on Different Strokes, and a whole bunch of stuff there too. And she talks about how Gary Coleman was abused his whole entire life, from childhood until he died from his wife. The woman he was married to pushed him down the stairs. Talks of, we talked about on this show, Belinda Blair, how she was being abused as a child and modeling as a child modeling. There's a lot of that stuff in here in An Open Secret about child modeling agencies and how some of these child modeling photographers and agents would take the pictures, innocent looking pictures of these kids, and they were selling them on eBay, some of them for $300 a piece. Not even nude photos, with their shirts off and stuff like that, but not even nude photos. And I've talked on my show about Elite Modeling Agency and John Casablancas and the allegations around him. This is a guy that Donald Trump turned his daughter over to, Elite Modeling Agency, Ivanka, when he wanted her to be a model. This is who he turned his daughter, his little 12, 13-year-old child, over to this guy who was a known for doing very unethical, immoral conduct, okay? And there's even a picture of John Casablancas at Studio 54 with these two of his little 13-year-old models, all dressed up like adult women, and they have a silver tray, and they're being served cookies and milk in champagne glasses, you know what I mean? But it really gets into this movie, An Open Secret, into the digital entertainment network by Bryan Singer that was funded with hundreds of millions of dollars. It's talk about how David Geffen funded $150 million into these guys, into like an internet-based movie studio where they were going to develop movies and TV series, and they were going to play them on the internet. But at the time, you couldn't. This is the time of dial-up. You couldn't watch movies and stuff, so no one was watching this stuff. But they were holding auditions, just like real movie studios, and hiring teenage boys and putting them in these films, and TV series. And there was lawsuits involved, widespread pedophilia in this case with the digital entertainment network and Bryan Singer and all these characters here. There's a lot of weird stuff with that going on. And now we hear about Harvey Weinstein's getting out in the public. So that's what the show today was supposed to be about, the movie An Open Secret. And right now it's available on Vimeo. You can watch it there on Vimeo and see the whole thing yourself. I have my concerns, other matters in there. Other people you see in that documentary that I know are apologists in other situations. There's a lot of disinfo. I'm not saying An Open Secret's a bad film. I'm not saying anything like that. But I'm just saying that the people that are doing it seem to worm their way into these things that are kind of involved, or apologists or excusers. Now, I talked at the beginning of the show about, and maybe I'll still tell the story Friday night. I might not have time to tell the whole story right now, about how I was mentioned in this book, Runaway and Missing Adults When No One Else Is Looking. And I think I took some articles I wrote. I've written about 600 articles on private investigation work over the years that were then republished all over the place and put on the internet and everywhere without my consent or any compensation. This book is written by Robert L. Snow, who seems to be a very well-respected retired detective. And he mentioned some of my work in finding missing runaway kids. I had this one case that came to my attention from a private investigator friend of mine in Northern California, where this young girl, she was like 14 years old when she got mixed up with these characters on the internet who were there were AOL message boards involving TV shows that this group all would come on there and discuss. They were fans of these TV shows on TV that were more geared toward teenagers, even though these adults that were involved. And they were all over the country. There was this group up in this couple up in Northern California in Sacramento. There was another couple. These were adult couples involved in a TV show targeting teenagers. They had a fascination with it. This other couple was down in Florida. And then there was a guy, an adult male, who was a homosexual guy who was up in the Northeast. And the couple up in the Northwest in Sacramento, she was a Wiccan. She was into witchcraft and all kind of stuff. And her husband was bisexual. And they were involved in group sex and stuff all the time. So this young 14-year-old girl who came from a very good family. A lot of these runaway children cases, the kids don't come from good kids, from families that are help. And these kids, you don't blame them for running away. So in some of these cases, you want to help the kid run even further. I had a case here in Las Vegas where both the son and the daughter were running away, and the mother's telling me, "Oh, my poor kids." And we go to their house; they're hoarders. They were living in hoarder conditions. It was horrible. Got stiffed on that bill too. But this case here, the one in Northern California, the parents were a very good Christian family. They owned a chain of restaurants. They were very successful, church-going folks, and they were very influential in the community. So, but even with that, when their kid ran away and turned up missing, they still needed help coordinating with the police. One of the most important things in a runaway child investigation, teenage runaway case, is the family has to build a rapport with the detectives investigating the case. Many times, these cases, you'll make a police report, and they won't even assign detectives to the case, okay? They'll just make a report, and they'll hope that they'll pull somebody over, and it's almost always teenage girls running away, and the girl will be in a car with a man who's driving, and then they'll say, "Well, what's your name?" And then they'll get lucky, and they'll stumble upon the kid. Because after a while, they stop working on these cases, or if they even start at all. So the first thing you got to do is you have to establish a rapport with the detectives. You call down and say, "Who's the detective in charge of my case?" And you establish a rapport with them. Now, in this case here, what I was able to do right away was I found them a local PI who was a retired cop in that neighborhood. He didn't have any experience in runaway cases, but he could at least be the liaison between the family and the police. And because the family owned these restaurants, I made the suggestion, well, find the detectives who are in charge of this case and invite them over for lunch with the PI at the family's restaurant once a week, or get them a free lunch or a free dinner. So now the cops feel obligated to help you out a little bit. But again, I told them, listen, let there be an intermediary between you and the cop, because another phenomenon that happens in these kind of situations is when you have grieving families, whether it's an abducted kid or a runaway kid, or there's been a death, a murder, and the parents are calling for updates. They want to know what's going on. If the investigators don't have something, okay, after a while they start feeling guilty, okay? And then there's tension between the family and the investigators. So if you have someone in the middle of that, okay, that takes away that feeling of guilt or failure or accusation that, hey, how come you're not working on this harder? If you have a buffer between that, then you keep the lines of communication open, because what will happen is the parents will start nagging these cops, well-meaning, they just, well, I want to know what's going on. That's not making the situation any better. And the cops will stop returning your calls, okay, and they'll stop updating. They'll start avoiding you. And then out of guilt, they'll stop even working on the case, because every time, because the last thing you want to do is pick up a file and say, oh, my God, there's nothing here, and the parents hate me. This is the worst thing you could do to move an investigation forward. But in this case, the parents had money, and they were able to fly me out there. And at the time, this was so long ago, this was like in 2000. I was very inexperienced in computer forensics, but we had the kid's computer. And I was able to use this tool called Computer Cop that I got from Bo Dietl, as a matter of fact. I got through Bo Dietl's office. But it was very rudimentary, basic computer forensic tool, nothing like the kind of stuff we have now. But I was able to find out the kid's password to her emails, to her AOL accounts. And I was able to find out what this kid would do was she was going into chat rooms and message boards with this group, this group of adults. And this group of adults had the public chat room where they would go and talk about this TV show, but they also had a secret chat room, a second secret chat room where they would go and talk about more private issues in their personal lives that they didn't want the larger group to know about. And it would also talk about people in the larger group. So I was able to get her password and find out about these groups. And what this kid would do was they were having live chats, and this kid would log the chat every night when they would have their chat and have their discussions, and she would save it. So we were able to recover that as well and see what all the stuff they were chatting about. And I had to read through all this stuff for hours and hours and hours and hours. I finally took the computer back to, I was living in Las Vegas at the time. I brought the computer back here and went through all the material to read and find out, learn their personalities. And I even went and I created my own fake profiles and went into these groups to monitor what was going on and try and befriend them and try and get invited into the secret chat room, which ultimately I did. I got into this secret chat room. And the thing is, on the surface, they all tried to make themselves out to be normal people, and even the couple down in Florida, they tried to present themselves as being a conservative couple who had connections with law enforcement, by the way. And ultimately what happened was you find out in their personal life that they were a bunch of perverts, actually. And the ultimate goal here, what they tried to create or produce, was the young girl was flirting with the husband of the couple down in Florida. And the wife who was an overweight woman who was married young to this guy who was a very handsome guy, but dumb as rocks. And he was flirting with the young girl, and the young girl was flirting with him. And the ultimate idea is that this woman was going to bring this little girl to Florida to give this girl to her husband as a gift. Okay? And this guy was going to be her first sexual encounter. It was going to be a very bizarre theory behind this whole group. And at one point, they even mailed her an envelope full of cash. But the parents intercepted that envelope, okay? And so when I came into contact with the parents, they said, something very mysterious happened 2 months ago. She received an envelope with no return address on it with cash. We asked her what it was. She said she didn't know what it was. So, we just kept the money. We didn't give our little daughter $300 in cash. But we just, I'm going to run out of time here in a minute to tell this whole story. So I'm going to tell the whole story. If you're listening to this on Saturday night, I'll have already told this story on Friday night. But there's a lot of elements of the story. Where this girl was next, they sent her a bus ticket inside a book. And the girl got on the bus, went down to Sacramento, stayed with that first couple. That's where she had her first sexual encounter with this couple that was first molested. Before she even got to the one she was being prepared for. And then they sent this kid across the country, mainly with the Renaissance Fair, with people that were vendors working at the Renaissance Fair and traveling at different Renaissance Fair locations, and which was traveling from one location to the other, being transported with these different people who had booths and stuff at the Renaissance Fair. And I even found in all these pictures of her where they were dressing her up like a little wench, and they had a collar and a leash on her and stuff. This is a little kid who never was exposed to any of this kind of stuff before in her life. She was also given drugs up there in Sacramento for the first time. For the first time she was given, by then she was 50, but she was given alcohol, she was given marijuana, and she was given to take with her some Xanax and stuff like that, and some pills to take with her on her trip, along with these characters. And the people at the Renaissance Fair knew that this was a runaway. Everyone involved in this knew that she was a runaway. And continued to traffic this child onto this trek down to Florida. Now, when I was reading these, oh boy, there's so much to this story. But I was able to take one of the people involved with this who was close to the group enough that because they would meet in person, this group as well too. Oh, we're out of time. Thank you so much. I'll tell the whole story. It'll be available on on YouTube and Spreaker and stuff like that. The whole entire story. I want to thank William Ramsey. Check out his new video, "The Smiley Face Killers." Yeah, sorry I ran out of time telling the full story, but I'll tell the whole thing. But when they actually met in person, at one of the occasions when they met in person, the gentleman who turned out to be my informant, who I flipped over, he knew that they were meeting secretly behind his back. And on one occasion, he walked into the room, one of their hotel rooms, just showed up unexpectedly late at night when they were meeting privately. And that couple in Sacramento had a son who was like 9-10 years old, and it was around Halloween when they met, and they had dressed him up as a Hooters girl in a Hooters girl outfit with the orange pants and the little sneakers. What's that? And the T-shirt, the Hooters T-shirt. And I don't know what they did with his hair or makeup or anything like that, but the kid, when the guy saw this, like, he totally freaked out. But he thought it was innocent because they were all so open-minded, such nice people. He didn't think anything. And the little boy was sitting on a man's lap who he didn't even know who the man was. I hate to tell you this, man. I'm going to tell you the whole story, but no one has ever been arrested in this case, okay? They've all gotten away with it. There were so many different jurisdictions because we would find the kid, find out later on that she had been at this certain Ren fair, but it was too late. They'd already gone. So by the time we were able to contact the police, I'll tell the whole story in detail. I didn't think it was going to take this long. But it's one of my most fascinating cases. And it reminded me, because I read the book about, I saw the book about mentioning me about working on runaway kid cases. And the same week, by coincidence, the Ren Fair here was in town. So it was been on my mind all week long. So I'll tell this story Friday night. A lot of new content up in the members section. I got a new story about where I just do a monologue about my experience with the Art Bell lawsuit and the Art Bell feud. And I talk about that. And that's available at oppermanreport.com. You can download it for $2, or you can become a member. Now, I really, really, really seriously, desperately need memberships right now because I was supposed to get a big job like 2 weeks ago, and it fell through. It would have been a job that would have lasted me until December, like a big job where I could keep billing. And then another one today, I just got a message right during the show here saying this guy wasn't going to think about it. So these are 2 jobs I was counting on. So the only thing I have now to get me through the month is the members section or donations, because we're already at the 19th of the month. So I got a lot of new content. I'm going to be putting up a show in there about the Scott Peterson case. But I'll give you a deal. Contact me at oppermanreport@gmail.com. And I'll give you a discount 13 months for like $69, something like that. But if you can help out, man, desperately need this money this month because I 2 big jobs slipped right through my fingers. So there's always that. Then also advertising. We are now on Alexa, Amazon Alexa, and we have 10 million people have access to that device. And you can hear our show now on Amazon Alexa. So just a great time to advertise, and it's so cheap. $500, you get 12 weeks. I'll give you a deal. So that's what's going on now. And then I'll finish telling a story about this runaway case, this runaway teen case. The girl this was many years ago, and she's like an adult now. But we got her back with the family. But we could never get these people who trafficked this child across the country. We could never get them arrested. And I have their names, their addresses. I traced, because we only had their online screen names, but I was able to locate and identify every one of these people and put together a full report with an affidavit and send it to the local police in their jurisdiction. We could never get any of these people arrested, even though we have overwhelming evidence. Hopefully, maybe I've talked to the family about maybe suing these people in civil court. But they've never agreed to that. But the girl did come back, and even though when she first was delivered back to her parents, she was resentful. She thought that she was having fun out there doing this kind of stuff. But then years later, she realized that she was trafficked and abused, and I recovered, and I believe doing well today. She's definitely not out there doing crazy stuff. So once again, I'll tell this whole story Friday night. And check out the member section. Several new items uploaded. And I'll give you a deal if you contact me directly.